Welcome into the show today as we dive into Ricky Pearsall, the San Francisco 49ers first round pick in the 2024 NFL draft. And before we dive into it, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and leave that review and hit that like button as we dive into our first draft prospect breakdown of the post 2024 draft season. It was a really fun draft cycle, a lot of scouting, a lot of deep dives into prospects. If you listen to me on 95.7 The Game every single day of the draft, night 1, 2, and 3, thank you so much. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Coast Standard Time as we dive into the Niners' next great receiver, that being first-round pick Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. The Niners came into this draft with 10 total draft picks and a flurry of trade rumors surrounding their star receivers, Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk. They wound up keeping both of those players and making just 8 of their 10 picks after day 3 of the NFL draft concluded. So let's break down the San Francisco 49ers 2024 draft class, and let's start again at the first round, pick 31, with Ricky Pearsall. San Francisco came into this draft process, dare I say, in an awkward position, because if they went receiver in the first round, which they did, they put themselves in the fan base in an awkward spot of like, what are you doing with Deebo? What are you doing with Aiyuk? And the minute the Ricky Pearsall pick came in, that fan reaction was not great. It was, oh my goodness, sky's falling. What are we doing with our star receivers? And again, San Francisco kept all of those players and have put themselves in a place to keep Deebo, Aiyuk, and put Pearsall somewhere in the rotation of their current 4-receiver mix, who I believe will be Deebo, Aiyuk, Juwan Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall. So Ricky Pearsall was somebody that the San Francisco 49ers met with just once. No top 30 visits, just one conversation with him at the Senior Bowl this past year. And from what Pearsall was saying in his post-draft press conference, that he wasn't expecting to get picked by the Niners. So it didn't just surprise you. It didn't just surprise me. It also surprised Ricky Pearsall himself. And I do find that pretty funny, knowing Kyle Shanahan probably wanted to keep that close to the vest. But Pearsall, 5-year college player. My initial thoughts when the pick came through was it wasn't who I was expecting to be picked at pick 31, but it was a player I believed the Niners would have on their draft board. Ricky Pearsall is one of 2 players in this draft class that was picked by the Niners that I classified as perfect Kyle Shanahan players. The other was Isaac Guerendo, running back from Louisville, who San Francisco traded up for in the 4th round, the other being Ricky Pearsall. So while I did say second round makes a lot more sense, I'm not someone who believes it was a stretch or a reach. I believe Ricky Pearsall has star caliber potential, knowing what he did at Florida and Arizona, and knowing what he had done his entire 5-year college career. I do think he's unjustly, I don't want to say scouted, but I do think he's unjustly, or people have based their opinions on the lack of quarterback play at Florida. They base their idea of who Pearsall is from production. And that's truly unfair because Pearsall, being 6'1", 190 pounds, has the size to play inside. He can also play outside. He is an incredible route runner with a large route tree. He's not going to come in being a limited or come in with a limited route tree. He can go in and out. He can do crossers. He can do go routes. He can do post routes. He can do slants. He can do the good old zig and zag, double moves. He's a really good deceiver within his routes too, setting up defensive backs, cornerbacks, linebackers, and safeties with his hands, with his feet, with his eyes, and with his hips. His hesitation move can leave defensive backs just lost in no man's land of like, what are we doing? It feels like sometimes when defenders guard him, it's almost like the minute he hits the hezi, they close their eyes and are like, where is he at? And he's already handful of steps past them. That's how smooth of a route runner he is. Again, he's very fluid in his routes and out of his cuts. He is somebody that, again, if he catches a defensive back sleeping, flat-footed, you might as well pack your bags because he's going to leave them in the dust. Look at his tape against Army, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, all those smaller schools. They did have plenty of NFL or draftable talent this past season. And playing at Florida, he's already played against some of the better schools in college football and shown he can play against the best of the best and flourish when playing some of the best defenses in the entire college football realm. He's someone that can stack linebackers and defensive backs and give, and this is the most important part, you can be a great route runner. You can have great hands. But Kyle Shanahan values, yes, route running, yes, hands, as all head coaches and offensive coordinators do. Kyle Shanahan values being able to give Brock Purdy, his quarterback, a consistent window to throw in. And Ricky Pearsall, in a lot of his tape, a lot of his routes, gives quarterbacks consistent windows to throw in. And I think a lot of that is not seen simply because, again, going back to production, the numbers don't show truly how good Ricky Pearsall can be and how good he was at Florida. Ricky Pearsall played with 3 different college quarterbacks, and all 3 of them have very different skill sets and very different play styles. Now, 2 of the quarterbacks you're going to know, one of them being the 2nd overall pick this past year, Jaden Daniels, who's now with the Commanders. Daniels and Pearsall played at Arizona State together, excuse me. And then the last 2 guys, Anthony Richardson, the Colts first-round draft pick this past draft, or I guess 2 drafts ago, then Graham Mertz, who was the quarterback this year. Very different quarterbacks, different play styles, and somehow Pearsall was productive enough through all 3 of those years to become a first-round pick, which that doesn't tell you on a team that has had a lot of quarterback injuries, where this year you keep your fingers crossed. It's Brock Purdy, it's Joshua Dobbs, it's Brandon Allen. You hope it's only Purdy, but if it isn't just Brock Purdy, Ricky Pearsall is a player that can flourish under all the quarterbacks he's played with prior to the NFL level, and you hoped and believe that'll carry over in to his NFL tenure. 65 catches for 965 yards this past year at Florida, a 2-time reception leader in college. So again, he is getting a lot of catches, is being the best receiver, consistently open and giving quarterbacks windows to throw in on his team 2 times through his 5 years in college. He also is someone that has gotten better every single year. So there is a conversation to be had of, hey, Pearsall is not really even hitting his stride yet. That doesn't mean he's going to be a project or he's raw or he's green. No, Pearsall is a very refined prospect coming into his rookie season, but there is still a lot of room to grow where, like Brandon Aiyuk, who came in, although unknown, rather refined for a rookie. He wasn't the top 10 pick, wasn't Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., but was someone that came in and had translatable skills to the NFL level. Ricky Pearsall is very much like Brandon Aiyuk in that, where late first-round draft pick. Some fans are shocked he's even drafted that early. Aiyuk was 25th overall, Pearsall being 31. But the traits they have are very translatable. Great route runner, good separation, ability to get open consistently and give quarterbacks windows to throw in. Pearsall is very similar to Aiyuk in that aspect, where the stats may not scream number 1 guy. The production may not scream, look at this amazing box score. Pearsall is someone who was a victim of quarterback play at Arizona State and Florida, but still found a way to become a refined receiver in his rookie season coming into the NFL. And a little older, again, a 5-year college player, but this past season, 4 receiving touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns being on jet sweeps, mind you. So he isn't just a pure receiver. He can do the jet sweep kind of game and give Kyle Shanahan some flexibility or give him some versatility to use Pearsall in many different ways on the offense. this past, or excuse me, in 2022, I believe, 55 of his 63 targets were 10 yards downfield. So he is someone with 4.4 speed, which isn't 4.2 speed. It's not Xavier Worthy levels of speed, but he is someone that has deceptive speed that can blow by defensive backs, cornerbacks, nickel, and outside cornerbacks, mind you. And with that great route running, he makes 4.41 speed look like 4.38 speed. And I think that's what makes Pearsall special. He's not just a one-trick pony. He isn't someone that is really fast but is going to struggle getting separation, or he isn't just a straight-line runner. It's in, out of the breaks. It's going to give Kyle Shanahan the deep crosser, the shallow cross, the slant route, the underneath stuff, the deep ball. It's going to give all and keep all of that open in an offense like Kyle Shanahan's. Pearsall has in a class that includes Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., that includes Brian Thomas Jr., that includes Xavier Worthy, many top prospect at the receiver position. There's an argument to be made that Ricky Pearsall has some of the best hands in the entire class, and that includes players picked behind him. Ladd McConkey from Georgia, phenomenal player now of the Chargers. In college, had great hands. An argument to be made, Pearsall has much better hands than Ricky, or Pearsall has much better hands than McConkey and others even picked ahead of him, mainly Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas. He's someone that when you have a receiver out of college, sometimes they can rely on being a body catcher. Ricky Pearsall is a pure hands catcher. He's someone that isn't afraid to go up and get the ball, someone that will catch the ball away from his frame. And I think of, and this isn't a knock on Aiyuk by any means, but this is more of a compliment to Ricky Pearsall, that sometimes Aiyuk is a body catcher. And it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you have to be. Deebo Samuel is a body catcher. And Pearsall is someone that on the sideline, he'll have his tiptoes in bounds, and that ball will be so far outside, but he'll be able to catch it and go outside the realm of the gridiron and make the catch, get you an extra first down, get you a touchdown, which again, while I think his ball skills are better than Brandon Aiyuk, you pair Ricky Pearsall's ball skills with the route running, and you at least have the makeup of a potential star receiver in one of the greatest offensive systems in the NFL, and Kyle Shanahan's. Pearsall has sticky hands. I have in my notes A++ ball skills. Only had 6 drops through 5 years of college. Talk about consistency in, out of breaks, as a route runner, separation, and with your hands. There's plenty of receivers. And I think, take Marquez Valdes-Scantling, for example. Now, I'm not comparing Pearsall, the player, to Valdes-Scantling, but Valdes-Scantling has burner-type speed. Bigger body guy, has speed, someone that can get open deep downfield that say, man, like if you can hit the home run ball for us, that's great. Valdes-Scantling has very inconsistent hands. Take a player like, I think it's Tez Watkins, who came out of North Carolina this past year. He is someone that has really inconsistent hands despite really good speed and the ability to get open. Now, if you can't pair those together, great hands and separation, you're going to have a hard time finding a place in the NFL, or you're just going to be a one-trick pony. Pearsall has been able to combine great hands and consistent separation, making him one of the better receiver prospects in the entire draft class. He ranks top 2 in explosive plays. He had 12, had a 76.2% catch rate, and he is someone, again, who is so reliable and on time with his routes, where if a quarterback is off schedule, misses a read, he is someone who will work back to the quarterback and continue to find himself being open. And speaking of Brock Purdy in this quarterback room, he is someone that I think fits perfectly with what Brock Purdy and the play style he has, simply because if Aiyuk is double covered like he was in the Super Bowl, or Deebo's injured or is more of a line of scrimmage, manufactured touches for kind of player, it gives San Francisco a consistent weapon, whether it be Pearsall, whether it be Aiyuk. It adds another element to the offense where somebody's always going to be open, and you're not just giving a player with great separation. You're giving Purdy a player that, again, great separator, great hands, where he's not just going to be open. He's going to catch that ball 95% of the time. Again, only 6 drops through 5 total years in college. And I'm sure one of the deciding factors in Kyle Shanahan's scouting process was Ricky Pearsall's ability to block. You know it. I know it. One of the struggles of higher drafted players by Kyle Shanahan, mainly Dante Pettis, Danny Gray, those guys have had a hard time getting on the field simply because no block, no rock. Now, Dante Pettis is no longer with the team, with the Bears and the Giants the past couple years. Danny Gray is someone that this year could be his final season with the Niners because he has not played in 2 years for a variety of reasons. One of those because he can't get himself out of the doghouse or healthy, but mainly out of the doghouse because he does not block. Ricky Pearsall is not just a willing blocker. He is a good blocker. When I think of a player like Juwan Jennings, who is much bigger than Pearsall, a willing blocker, someone to get his hands dirty, is not going to take plays off, right? That is Ricky Pearsall, albeit a smaller player. He's willing to get his hands dirty, open up lanes for Deebo, McCaffrey, Juszczyk, Kittle, anything underneath, and even some things downfield, like in the red zone. You want to run a screen pass, Pearsall is going to open up the inner lane and block the nickel back to allow Deebo to cut back inside, free up space, and give him easy touchdowns that you never know could lead to wins, playoff wins, and if you get really lucky, Super Bowl victories. I love Ricky Pearsall. I think the idea of him being a reach, I get it. He wasn't the tackle. He wasn't Cooper DeJean. He wasn't a person you expected still on the board to be drafted at that spot. Johnny Newton, again, Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid McKinstry. I get the Ricky Pearsall. Really? I don't want you to focus on the name. I want you to focus on who he is as a player. And the Niners did try to trade back in the first round. Now, I would like to assume, and again, it's an assumption, that they fielded offers. The offers they had, in front of them were either not good enough, or there was fear that if they traded back, they were not going to get Ricky Pearsall. And if you look at the second round, especially those first 5 picks, 3 receivers go in the top 5. Now, I understand there are people in the chat currently. Fish and Chips, who was watching us on the Krug show earlier, says rookies playing time on average in year 1 with Grand Admiral Moff Shanahan. And even Bobo says, I don't understand why Kyle Shanahan keeps drafting receivers and running backs and never plays them. I get that. I already mentioned players like Dante Pettis, Ronnie Bell's in that conversation, albeit a late round pick, a Danny Gray being one of them. I get it. There is, and even on draft night, my radio partner Mark Grandy said, there's no promise Ricky Pearsall is not in the doghouse year 1. There's no promise he's getting valuable playing time year 1. Kyle Shanahan has drafted 3 receivers, maybe 4, if you include Dante Pettis. So 3 of the 4 receivers he's drafted, with Pearsall being the second highest one of all time. Deebo, Pearsall, and Aiyuk, mainly Deebo and Aiyuk, have all had instant impacts. Now, they're rookies. You can't expect them to be these great, phenomenal players year 1. There is a translation into the NFL that they're going to have to learn new things and, get stronger and improve the route running. And there is obviously going to be a time and place where they're going to struggle. But I don't see Ricky Pearsall as a player that in year 1 can't have an impact. Now, how much of an impact is that? I think at the high end, he can be a starting slot receiver for this team. And if someone goes down, which Deebo tends to get hurt for at least 3 or 4 games a season, Aiyuk, I think, missed the Rams game or got hurt in the Rams game early in last year. And even Juwan Jennings has had some nagging injuries over his time in the NFL. I would not doubt Pearsall either pushing Juwan Jennings for a job or just being in a rotation at the slot receiver position. Ronnie Bell got time last year. Pearsall is a much better receiver than Ronnie Bell. Chris Conley got time late in the year. Now guys weren't playing. Keep that in mind. But Ray McLeod got time because guys got hurt or they just wanted a different look on the field. I can see Kyle Shanahan looking at Ricky Pearsall and being like, look, you may not have 65 catches this year, but if you have 20, 30, and catch 1 or 2 touchdowns, like I don't see that being unrealistic for Ricky Pearsall, knowing in a year or so, guys like Juwan Jennings and Deebo Samuel could be out the door. I put on Twitter that the 2019 draft class is a crazy draft class. No one's comparing this draft class to that draft class. But I'm someone who believes, like that draft class having 3 instant starters in Nick Bosa for obvious reasons, Deebo Samuel, Andre Greenlaw, I believe Ricky Pearsall and others in this class, mainly Renardo Green, and probably Isaac Guerendo, although Guerendo's not going to start because of Christian McCaffrey. There are some instant impact players on or in this draft class, and Pearsall leads that group of players that can get on the field relatively early and impact football games for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, again, I'm not going to join the group of, unnamed executives and say he'll have, 1,000 yards and all that stuff. It's like, no, that's absurd. That's putting unrealistic expectations on a young player in year one. But you have to also think the last time Kyle Shanahan had a first-round receiver, it was Brandon Aiyuk. Aiyuk played and started almost every single game his rookie season. Deebo Samuel in 2019, a second-round pick, started and played in almost every single game his rookie season. I don't think Kyle Shanahan would draft a receiver this early and not play them. The only reason why Aaron Banks didn't play in year one as a second-round pick was because they had Laken Tomlinson, who was obviously set as a starter, and Banks had never played a right guard before and couldn't make that transition in year one. Ricky Pearsall isn't transitioning to a different position. He's sliding into an open spot in a rotation where this team does need another receiver at the slot with outside flexibility that will block. There are going to be times this year where this team goes 4, sometimes 5 wide, and Pearsall is going to be out on the field, and he's going to be open. Ronnie Bell caught, I think, 2 touchdowns last year. Like, there is going to be a time where Ricky Pearsall is out there. Now, continuing with Pearsall here, he can play in the slot, can play over the middle, can line up outside. He is someone that can win at all 3 phases on offense and can penetrate and succeed in all 3 phases of the defense. But he's mainly going to be a slot receiver. 62% of his targets came out of the slot last year. And I praised him for the last 30 minutes. So what are the knocks on Ricky Pearsall? Because no prospect is perfect, right? Ricky Pearsall being 6'1", 190, being a relatively nice size for a receiver and a nice size for a slot receiver. There are some times with over physical corners being a smaller receiver, mainly playing outside, that he's going to get knocked off his routes. He's going to have a hard time getting open, but that's why he plays the majority of his snaps in the slot, because he's not going to have to go against a 6'1", 6'2", 6'3" cornerback that's going to have 20 pounds on him. He is someone that's going to play against, the Lenores of the world or smaller cornerbacks that he can actually beat physically, either off the jump with his hands and deceive them with his eyes, his hips, and his feet. Is Pearsall perfect? No. You wish he was 6'4", 230 pounds. You wish he was a bigger body receiver that can go up and get it outside like Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. can. But Kyle Shanahan's offense doesn't rely on these big-bodied receivers to win outside because the offense is mainly structured around the middle of the field and winning towards the sideline, hence deep crossers, post routes, line of scrimmage stuff with Deebo Samuel. So Pearsall, and again, I had two players on the draft board that I looked at and said, yep, these two guys are the perfect Kyle Shanahan offensive players, Isaac Guerendo and Ricky Pearsall. I was not shocked they fell in love with him. And it's not just him as a receiver. He also does give you punt return flexibility, averaging over 10 yards of punt return on just 15 punts, but there is some experience there. And if you don't want to take my word for it, that's fine. Am I the greatest draft expert of all time? No, I'm not proclaiming to be. Take CJ Stroud, AFC Rookie of the Year, flailing in his seat, being upset and angry that, yes, the Niners got Ricky Pearsall. He called him elite. Now, what does elite mean to you and me and him might be different, but he even said Ricky Pearsall was a player he wanted before he knew the Texans were getting Stephon Diggs. If that is not high praise to a point of Ricky Pearsall, in CJ Stroud's eyes, was a fit for the Texans in the same conversation of Stephon Diggs. Now, I'm not saying you'd want Pearsall over Stephon Diggs. I'm just saying CJ Stroud valued Pearsall that much to get that upset, calling him elite and saying, man, I wanted him before we traded for Stephon Diggs. Even Brandon Aiyuk, a player Pearsall tested better than coming out of college, said, wow, John, wow, Kyle, fire pick amidst contract negotiations. And someone, because there is so many similarities, could have been angry and pissed about being like, really? Is that my replacement? Aiyuk said, that's a fire pick. So if you don't want to take my word for it or question who I believe Pearsall can be, take CJ Stroud's words. Take Brandon Aiyuk's words for it. Because those two players are either the offensive player of the year, or it's Brandon Aiyuk about to get about $25 million per year in a near $100 million contract. So you don't want to take my word. Take two of the best players in the NFL's word for how good Pearsall can be. And again, when I tell you he's an excellent route runner with a wide variety of routes to run, a wide route tree, that is one knock on a lot of rookies. They come into the NFL, put in a college system that hinders their growth. We want you to do, we want you to do this one thing really well, and that's all you're going to do. That's not Ricky Pearsall. He transferred schools from Arizona State to Florida, 3 different college quarterbacks, produced at every single level, and proved not just production-wise, but route running at every single level. Like, again, who's to say Pearsall is still, hasn't even hit his stride yet? And as a 5-year college player, a little older than you'd probably want in the first round, but if he hasn't hit his stride yet, and you put him in Kyle Shanahan's offense with the ability to separate, get open, block, he doesn't have the knocks on his game that previous Shanahan receivers that have found themselves in the doghouse, being cut, being traded, or just not playing has. Pearsall is, again, go to Brandon Aiyuk, for example. We all love Brandon Aiyuk. You love him. I love him. We all should love him. If you don't love him, start loving him. Great receiver. Gonna get paid. Probably this team's best pure receiver over Deebo Samuel. Ricky Pearsall, from an RAS score standpoint, tested better in almost every single aspect coming out of college. And Aiyuk has transformed into an amazing near all-pro, Pro Bowl receiver. Here's the thing. Why couldn't Pearsall be a better player than Aiyuk? He's, according to the RAS, different body builds, mind you, but more athletic, player that has similar speed, a higher catch radius, is more agility, more acceleration. I just think that Ricky Pearsall is someone that he's a receiver everybody in the NFL would covet, just like Brandon Aiyuk. There's a reason why teams sat back and say, man, like the Niners got Ricky Pearsall. If you look at the fans were upset. The fans were upset. Sure. It wasn't the tackle. It wasn't Cooper DeJean. Ricky Pearsall amongst NFL ranks, executives, GMs, draft pundits, scouts, former and current players said, oh my goodness. We didn't expect that, but Ricky Pearsall and Kyle Shanahan's offense can flourish on day one. Now, I also do think if you're going to talk about Ricky Pearsall, you have to talk about the future, because the Niners in this entire draft class drafted a lot of should be ready to go year one players. Pearsall, Renardo Green, Dominic Puny probably isn't going to start year one, but if someone gets hurt, it's probably that sixth man off the bench. A lot of 5-6 year players in college. Pearsall, again, 5 years. But I think for Ricky Pearsall, I think Kyle Shanahan sat back and I think he watched, the 6 games or 5-ish games Deebo Samuel got hurt in and missed. And I think that frustrated him. When you go back and you watch the games against the Browns, Deebo's initial injury, then the subsequent games against the Vikings and Bengals, the offense was hindered. Now, there are a variety of reasons for that. You have to credit the opposing defenses for doing so, and a Bengals defense and a Browns defense, those schemes, those Jim Schwartz defenses have given Kyle Shanahan style offenses fits for a long time, even pre-San Francisco. That said, move ahead to the playoffs. Deebo gets hurt. He gets hurt early in the Packers game. The offense start to stumble. Now, the defense didn't play great. No one's ignoring that, but then he doesn't play against the Lions, and then he gets hurt against Kansas City. What happens to the offense? Instead of this vast, stars everywhere scheme, you go from Deebo, who Kyle Shanahan, unfortunately, and I get why, but at times can over-rely on him being the focal point of the offense. You take him away, and Jauan Jennings is a good receiver, but there's a reason why he's not a number 2 and number 3 in the slot. Limited in regards to being a star, but is certainly a great role player and can play a large role on a really good team, hence Jauan Jennings being so loved in the Bay Area. But you then tell opposing defenses you can double team Brandon Aiyuk and the other guys, Kittle, who has been an inline tight end in back-to-back Super Bowls and not utilized correctly. You now insert, hopefully, a healthy Deebo Samuel back into the fray, a Jauan Jennings on his last year of his contract, wanting to get paid big money, might be gone in 1 year's time along with Deebo Samuel. Then you also insert Ricky Pearsall, a player that, unlike Jauan, unlike Deebo, and more so like Brandon Aiyuk, has the ability to get open on every single play, is a great separator, and can continue to take pressure off of Aiyuk and make him not the only receiver that can get open by himself. Kyle Shanahan's scheme is awesome. No one's questioning that. Kyle Shanahan's scheme is one of the best in football at scheming up players open, whether it's on double moves, crossing routes, getting a free release for Aiyuk or Deebo or whatnot. Deebo's not a great route runner. Jauan Jennings, for all his worth, is not a great route runner. George Kittle, for as great as he is, hasn't always been utilized correctly because of the blitzes Kansas City has utilized against San Francisco. They have used him more on the end line. Then you add in Pearsall, and you give this offense another weapon that has the ability to continuously and consistently get open with great hands. It opens the offense more and more and more, and it's going to make a team like Kansas City with Steve Spagnuolo, one of the greatest defensive coordinators of the last 20-plus years. It's going to give him somebody else his secondary has to scheme against, has to circle on the chalkboard. Whereas if Deebo Samuel's off the field like he was in the Super Bowl, you have to hope Jauan Jennings, who he did, mind you, had the game of his life and throw and catch a touchdown pass. Whereas if you put Ricky Pearsall on the field just this past February in a Kyle Shanahan offense, I guarantee you there are other plays that are made. Now, I'm not saying Pearsall comes in and changes the entire game. I'm not saying Pearsall jumps in day one and steals Aiyuk's job or takes Deebo's job. What I'm saying is he, in year one, can complement everything Aiyuk and Deebo and Kittle and Jauan Jennings can do. And later on in the year, once he has his reps, once he completely learns the offense, then he can take over a role, maybe start a game. I think of it this way. Kyle Shanahan has always looked for that bigger body slot receiver. Jalen Hurd, who eventually got hurt and broke his back, and it wasn't the same, multiple leg injuries, and couldn't get on the field. He went and found Jauan Jennings. Now, since he's found Jauan, for as great as he is, Kyle Shanahan has been looking for the smaller slot receiver to complement the larger slot receiver. Now, it just so happens Pearsall is an amazing slot receiver, but can also play inside and outside to give you more versatility. It also gives Kyle Shanahan 4 different and distinct weapons. He has Deebo Samuel, this wide back, this thumper on offense, line of scrimmage, manufactured plays for. He has Brandon Aiyuk, the separator, the pure receiver to get open downfield, to make plays on deep crossers and be Brock Purdy's favorite target. Then he also has Jauan Jennings, third and Jauan, big slot receiver that can outmatch smaller nickelbacks. Then you add in Ricky Pearsall. He can play the mismatch game. He can play, he can play chess against an opposing defense. And then you add in Christian McCaffrey, who we haven't even talked about yet. And then you add in George Kittle, who maybe if he is the inline tight end come a playoff game, San Francisco still has 4 to 5 weapons on offense to play with. And so the Pearsall pick I get may have been confusing to some. I understand it wasn't the tackle, it wasn't the guard. I just think that who's to say Ricky Pearsall can't be Adam Thielen for the Vikings the last couple of years pre-Panthers stint? Who's to say Pearsall, who I know folks will comp him to Anthony Gonzalez from the Colts back in the day and Julian Edelman, who's to say he can't be Tyler Lockett, not a small guy, but not a massive guy, but shifty, great route runner and always open. Like, if you put Tyler Lockett or a style receiver like that in a Kyle Shanahan offense, you're going to get a massive amount of production, and you're going to get clutch play after clutch play. And again, Pearsall has great hands, great route runner. And going back to the playoffs, I think Kyle Shanahan sat there like he always does and has to watch the film in the biggest moments of the biggest games and says, man, Deebo's off the field, they're doubling Aiyuk, and I have Jauan Jennings who can't get open. And it's no offense to Jauan, it's just not who he is as a player, nor should you or I expect him to be that. If only I had somebody else that can get open. I don't trust Ronnie Bell. Danny Gray just ain't it. Chris Conley is a veteran special team player. Man, if only I had another guy to get open. There's no promise Deebo Samuel lasts 10 games this year. There's no promise that Deebo Samuel doesn't make it 18-plus games and then gets hurt in the final game. You have to have more than one receiver to be able to get open. Insert Ricky Pearsall. And I think Kyle Shanahan sat back, watched 3 playoff games where his offense just struggled to get anything going, and it took his team about a half or 3 quarters to find their strides, to fight and claw their way back into games. And I'm sure as much as he loves Deebo, much as I love Deebo and you love Deebo, he doesn't have somebody outside of Aiyuk that can get open by themselves, separate, and give Brock Purdy a consistently open weapon with really good hands. And I'm sure that has crushed Kyle Shanahan because it crushed me, that you're up in the playoffs in the Super Bowl and you can't close it out for a variety of reasons. But I guarantee you, had you had another weapon outside of Aiyuk on the field, you probably would have won that game. I I also think that Pearsall gives you two explosive, excellent separators on the field at all times if he and Aiyuk play a ton of snaps together. And a team like the Rams who got better, a young team like the Cardinals who are up and coming, a team like Seattle who got Byron Murphy and Christian Haynes and did improve their offense. It's not like the pack hasn't gotten closer to San Francisco. I do think San Francisco adding another offensive weapon makes an offense that was arguably the best in football even more dangerous, despite in year one it not being a need. And I can even argue that, yes, it was a need because this team doesn't or didn't have two pure receivers. Now with Ricky Pearsall, they do. I think that may be the difference in some games this year where, like Fish and Chips always says, you have to consider matchups. Shanahan doesn't consider matchups. I would disagree with that, and I can argue that, well, thank you for watching and listening, that Kyle Shanahan even more so now can consider those matchups, knowing he has another guy as a receiver that he can put out there and play chess with the Jim Schwartz defense, with teams like Steve Spagnuolo on the Chiefs, LaFleur and the Packers, and even Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn. With the Lions, I think all this does is yes, does it strengthen an already strength of the team? Sure. But I do think as of now, your receiver room is one of the best in the entire league because now you're not just three deep. And I can argue even last year, you may have just been too deep simply because Juwan Jennings, for as much as I love him, is kind of great run blocker, like phenomenal player, great pass blocker. He isn't someone you're going to go out there and say, you know what, Juwan, lead my team, be my receiver number 2. He's a really, really top tier receiver number 3, big slot guy. You're likely not going to have him on the outside running crazy route trees, ins and outs, double moves, and doing stuff like that. Although he's a great athlete and a really good clutch player, I think that Ricky Pearsall will bring high effort. He can win in all three phases of the defense, whether it's underneath, over the middle, over the top. I think he just brings something that strengthens your receiver room on day one. And if you want to go into next year, being 2025, if Deebo is going to be gone, which reports may kind of lean towards that being the truth, or even Juwan Jennings being gone, you at least found your Juwan Jennings replacement, but you also now have, if he is gone, your replacement for Deebo Samuel, which I know Pearsall isn't Deebo Samuel, and no one's saying he plays like Deebo Samuel because he doesn't. But I can even argue that Deebo Samuel may have been more, or the offense needed to rely on Deebo Samuel more because of the quarterback play that was here. Jimmy Garoppolo being the biggest reason for that. I love Jimmy Garoppolo, but didn't push the ball downfield, didn't have great touch. He was more so, let's feed Deebo Samuel, let him do the dirty work. Whereas Brock Purdy, great timing, will push the ball downfield. And I always point this out, but go back to the Viking game. They lost. Purdy threw 2 picks, may have been concussed, but Deebo Samuel did not play in that game. Yes, I know CMC fumbled. There were a lot of issues. I do think that there's one play, I think it's on the second interception, maybe the first one by Purdy. He's pointing towards the receiver, and I think it wasn't Aiyuk, but he's pointing to the receiver of like, you need to be here. And that wasn't Aiyuk. He has the chemistry with Aiyuk to know where he'll be at all times. And I think Pearsall, even at Florida, when the quarterback's timing was off, when the quarterback didn't hit him in stride, who was always there? Pearsall was open. His timing was great. And if the quarterback was messing around, didn't see it on time, Ricky Pearsall caught the football. And I think it's going to be very easy for a player like Pearsall to fit with a quarterback like Purdy. And I also think a receiver like Pearsall can gain the trust of Brock Purdy very early in his NFL career. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear in OTAs and minicamp and training camp, depending on how much Purdy plays, that wow, the chemistry for Brock Purdy and Pearsall is already existent, and it's already kind of two peas in a pod, and it's flourishing, where he already has that with Aiyuk. Pearsall is someone that will be there at his spot consistently. And that's one thing San Francisco hasn't had outside of Aiyuk, even Deebo at times, because he isn't a great route runner and isn't a pure receiver, isn't always where he needs to be. Juwan Jennings, for as great as he is, Pearsall brings something else to the table. And I think, in 2024 and coming into this year, San Francisco now has two receivers that can separate, are explosive, can get downfield, they can win at all three levels of the defense, whereas last year they didn't have two of those players. And just very, broadly, Ricky Pearsall is a player that just screams Kyle Shanahan guy, and he has the skill set to flourish in this system from day one and for a long time. And the great thing is, and I pointed this out, that I didn't believe San Francisco was going to trade out of 31, although they tried, or at least listened to offers. They value that fifth-year option. And we're seeing it right now play out in front of us. Brandon Aiyuk, fifth-year option. Is he going to play on that? Will he get traded? He's not getting traded, mind you. Neither is Deebo, at least for 1 year. But now they have that fifth-year option for Pearsall, where let's say San Francisco traded back to 42. If you felt good at taking him at 42, you just take him at 31. Like, I think fans, and sometimes even some draft experts like Mel Kiper, they viewed the Renardo Green draft pick as a reach, and okay, I can get that, but it wasn't like Renardo Green was a fifth-round projection. He was a third or fourth-round projection, and San Francisco was taking him at the end of the second round, which is basically a third-round pick anyways. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't a reach. I'm not saying I would have made that pick, but translate that point of view to Pearsall. Pearsall is essentially an early second-round pick with the fifth-year option tied to him. The only reason why he's a reach is because players like Ladd McConkey and Adonai Mitchell didn't go in front of him. Like, had Cooper DeJean gone in front of him and McKinstry gone in front of him, it's not a reach. But San Francisco loved him enough to say, you know what? We're not going to trade back. We're going to take Pearsall right here, right now. And they knew there was going to be backlash. They knew there was going to be, why isn't it a right guard? Why isn't it a right tackle? They obviously didn't covet that position enough with who was on the board at 31 to go elsewhere. Now, that said, was it the right pick? Time will tell. I'm not here to scream, oh, he's horrible, or he's going to be terrible. I may have questions. Last year, I hated the Cam Latu pick, and we've seen how that turned out. But I'm here to tell you that I believe Ricky Pearsall has the skill set to be an instant impact player in Kyle Shanahan's offense from day one. Now, he has to go out there, and like every draft pick, every free agent signing, they have to go out there and prove their worth every single day. But I firmly believe that in Shanahan's offense, you are not going to hear Ricky Pearsall's name next to the doghouse, near the doghouse. I just don't think he's that kind of player because he has a high effort. He's someone that had to earn every step of the way. And at Florida, because the quarterback play was so bad, he had to almost fight for the ball every single play. He's someone that had to earn his keep. And if there's a head coach, an offensive coordinator that wants his receivers to go out there every single snap and play and earn their keep, that is Ricky Pearsall. And had this been Xavier Worthy, I would have had more questions. Had this been Adonai Mitchell, I would have had more questions. Had this been even Brian Thomas, who was picked at 22 via trade back by Jacksonville, I would have still had more questions. Like, it all comes down to preference at receiver, at and who you're drafting, I can almost guarantee you there were some receivers San Francisco didn't even have on their board simply because of scheme fit and play style. And I can almost guarantee you, if you want to call them a gold helmet player, I would not be surprised if Ricky Pearsall was one of San Francisco's gold helmet bona fide star players they wanted to get in this draft. Now, maybe they wanted him at 42 and couldn't trade back. Maybe they wanted him at 40 and there wasn't the offer they wanted to take. But I also wouldn't doubt Shanahan saying, you know what? We are not afraid to quote unquote reach for a receiver. And this guy fits our system, our mentality, and how we like to play to a T. So let's not risk not getting him in here because what he can do on the field is truly something special. And he hasn't even been able to been coached by a head coach like Kyle Shanahan with a quarterback, consistent quarterback like Brock Purdy, in an offense where he doesn't have to be the guy day one. And arguably, Ricky Pearsall never has to be the guy because Deebo's here. And once he's gone, Aiyuk will still be here. Pearsall's always going to be able to likely be a number two. And if he's a really good number two, like a Tyler Lockett was at times, like Wes Welker was, or Jordy Nelson was, and I don't want to just name white receivers, but there's a reason why he fits that mold. He's a shifty white slot receiver that looks like Jack Harlow, hence the nickname Yak Harlow, but can really do it all on the field. Now, again, he's not 6'4". He's not going to, be Marvin Harrison Jr. and be Julio Jones. That's what you hope your Brandon Aiyuks are. Now he gets his, if you want to go to Falcons comps, although I wouldn't think it's too accurate, Taylor Gabriel. Like he gets that small, short slot receiver that can do it all at 6'1", 190 pounds that isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Again, if that does not scream Kyle Shanahan, I don't know what you're looking for in a receiver because that is the prototypical Kyle Shanahan receiver. And overall, that is Ricky Pearsall. Just a Kyle Shanahan guy to a T. And this scheme is going to make defensive backs look foolish. And this is the kicker that I will stick to until Pearsall becomes a bust, if that ever happens, which I hope it doesn't, obviously. But you're not just putting a good separator in the system and saying, go out there and make some moves. You're putting a great separator in a system that can already allow guys that can't separate to separate. So if he's gaining all this space in college, imagine what he can do in this offense with this head coach. And again, Pearsall is just an awesome player. I don't think it was a reach. We can dive into reaches a little later when we dive into Ronaldo Green or even a Jarrett Kingston in the next few weeks. But Ricky Pearsall, 5-year player, 6'1", 190, 3 different quarterbacks at college. Not much consistency, but the ability to separate, the acceleration in, out of his routes, to make defensive backs look lost consistently is just what makes me shake my head and say, how did San Francisco get this guy? I am someone who mocked him to San Francisco via trade up in the second round. They said, you know what, we like him more than that. Take him at 31. And I'm not going to sit here and say they're wrong because the skill set he has is not just going to translate to the NFL. It's going to flourish in a Kyle Shanahan offense. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. A ton of you watched our undrafted free agents breakdown. That was incredible, the turnout we had for that. And I hope you enjoyed my Ricky Pearsall breakdown today. In-depth look at who he is as a player, his history, and how he fits in this offense. Thank you in the chat to people like Bobo, who's always here, Prime Sports Media, Fish and Chips. I think it's is it Amar saying, thank you guys so much for watching Off Hamster Wheel. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your week and stay tuned. Thursday night, we're diving into Ronaldo Green and going to scout the San Francisco 49ers second round cornerback. I have a surprising pro comp that may perk your ears up and say, I like that. That's all I have for you today. Please like, share, subscribe, leave that review. Follow us on social media at 49ers.access is the Instagram. 49ers_access is the Twitter. You can use our promo code at SeatGeek.com. Put 49ers access, 49 ERSACCESS in the promo code text box and save yourself $20 off your first purchase. If you want to go to an NFL game this upcoming season, NBA playoff game, or even an MLB game this year, use that promo code and save yourself $20 off. Again, thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave that review on the audio platforms. And until next time, until we deep dive into Renardo Green, the San Francisco 49ers second round pick, my name is Sterling Bennett, and stay faithful.